Imagine finding out that something you do every single week, something you do specifically because you are trying to be practical, trying to save money, trying not to waste food, is quietly and systematically creating the conditions for one of the most deadly, most silent cancers in the human body. Does that sound extreme? I want you to stay with me for a moment because it is not. There is a habit that hundreds of millions of people repeat every single week without a second thought: reheating leftovers. And the truth about what happens inside four very specific foods the second time heat touches them is something that most people will go their entire lives without ever being told. In the next few minutes, I am going to show you exactly which four foods are the most dangerous to reheat. I am going to explain what they are chemically turning into inside your body when you press that button on your microwave. And I am going to show you why that transformation connects directly to one of the cancers with the lowest survival rates in all of modern medicine. I am going to tell you something today that I believe every single person who cooks at home deserves to know, because I have sat across from too many patients who received a devastating diagnosis and looked at me with fear in their eyes and asked the same question: why did nobody warn me about this sooner? I am done staying quiet about this. Now, here is what you need to understand before we go any further. Your pancreas never warns you. It does not hurt when it is being damaged. It does not swell. It does not send you a signal while the harm is quietly building over years and decades of repeated chemical exposure. By the time a patient experiences the first symptom of pancreatic cancer, the dull back pain, the yellowing of the skin, the sudden unexplained weight loss, the disease has typically been developing silently for years. And the 5-year survival rate for pancreatic cancer sits at around 12%. 12. That is not a disease that gives you a comfortable window for a second chance once it announces itself. It is a disease where prevention is not just the best strategy. It is the only strategy that works consistently. And some of what feeds that prevention, or that destruction, is sitting in your refrigerator right now, waiting to be reheated for tomorrow's lunch. Before I walk you through the four foods, I need you to understand what is actually happening at the chemical level when food is reheated. Because without that foundation, everything I tell you next will sound like fear without a reason. And this is not fear. This is biochemistry. When certain foods are cooked the first time, natural chemical reactions occur. Proteins interact with sugars under heat. Nitrogen-containing compounds react with available amino acids. Fats begin to oxidize. In most cases, the compounds produced by first-time cooking are present in amounts the body can manage, process, and over time eliminate. But reheating fundamentally changes the equation. The second time heat is applied, several things happen simultaneously. First, whatever protective antioxidant compounds were present in the original food are further degraded or destroyed. The biological buffers that would have partially neutralized harmful compounds are gone. Second, the chemical reactions that produced small amounts of carcinogenic compounds during first cooking are accelerated again, but this time without those buffers. Third, bacterial activity that occurred during the cooling and storage phase has already begun converting certain compounds, particularly nitrates in vegetables, into more reactive and more dangerous intermediate forms. Heat then drives those intermediates forward into confirmed carcinogens. The specific class of compounds we are most concerned about from a cancer research standpoint are N-nitroso compounds, also called nitrosamines, and heterocyclic amines. Both have been classified by the International Agency for Research on Cancer as probable human carcinogens. Animal studies have provided strong evidence for their carcinogenicity on multiple organs, specifically including the pancreas. Research published in peer-reviewed journals has identified dietary N-nitroso compounds as one of the primary pathways through which repeated exposure contributes to pancreatic cancer risk. This is not speculative. This is documented in the scientific literature, and it connects directly to the foods I am about to name. Let us start. Let us start with the good news. Before I tell you the 4 foods that are working against you, I want to tell you about the foods that are working for you. Because I am not here to make you afraid of your kitchen. I am here to give you a framework for making smarter decisions inside it. The first food I want you to know about is one of the most powerful anti-cancer foods available to you right now, and it is broccoli. Now I know some of you are already making a face. I understand, but stay with me for a moment. As you age, something changes in your body that most people never talk about. Your body's internal detoxification systems, the cellular pathways responsible for identifying and neutralizing damaged or mutating cells, begin to slow down. The checkpoint systems that once caught problems early become less responsive. Broccoli contains a compound called sulforaphane, and what sulforaphane does inside your body is remarkable. It activates a set of genes called the NRF2 pathway, which is essentially the master switch for your body's internal antioxidant defense system. When sulforaphane activates that switch, your cells begin producing their own protective enzymes in far greater quantities. Think of it this way. Your body has a fire suppression system built in. Sulforaphane is what turns on the pressure. Broccoli, eaten fresh or lightly steamed, not overcooked, gives your pancreatic cells a meaningful layer of chemical protection against the kind of ongoing oxidative stress that precedes cancer development. You can steam it. You can roast it lightly. You can eat it raw with a little olive oil and lemon. The key word is lightly prepared. Overcooking destroys the enzyme responsible for activating sulforaphane. 2 to 3 minutes of steaming is the target. The second food that can help protect you is turmeric, specifically the compound curcumin that gives it its color. Curcumin has been one of the most extensively studied natural compounds in cancer research over the last 2 decades, and the research on pancreatic cancer specifically is striking. Curcumin has demonstrated the ability to interfere with several of the molecular signaling pathways that pancreatic cancer cells use to grow and spread. It reduces inflammatory signaling. It disrupts cancer cell proliferation. And it does this without meaningful toxicity to healthy cells. Now, curcumin on its own is poorly absorbed by the body, but here is a simple fix that most people do not know. Combining turmeric with a small amount of black pepper, specifically a compound in black pepper called piperine, increases curcumin's bioavailability by up to 2,000%. That is not a typo. Add a pinch of black pepper every time you cook with turmeric, a golden milk, a curry, scrambled eggs. The combination matters. The third protective food is green tea. Green tea contains a group of polyphenols called catechins, and the most potent of them, EGCG, has been studied directly in the context of pancreatic cancer cell lines. EGCG has demonstrated the ability to induce apoptosis, programmed cell death, in pancreatic cancer cells in laboratory studies. It also disrupts the formation of new blood vessels that tumors rely on to grow. 2 to 3 cups of properly brewed green tea per day provides a meaningful dose of these catechins. Brew at 80 degrees Celsius, not boiling, which degrades catechins. Steep for 2 to 3 minutes. No milk, which binds catechins and reduces absorption. Which brings us to the second half of today's conversation, the foods that are quietly working against you. Before I get into the 4 dangerous foods, I want to check in with you for just a moment. If what I have shared so far is making sense to you, if you are starting to see your kitchen a little differently, leave a comment below with the word protect. It lets me know you are still with me, and it helps this channel reach the people who need this information the most. Now, let us talk about the 4 foods you should never, ever reheat. And I want you to understand, I am not saying avoid these foods entirely. I am saying that reheating them creates a specific chemical transformation that your body was not designed to manage repeatedly. The distinction matters. This is not about eliminating things from your life. It is about changing one habit in how you handle these specific foods after they have been cooked once. Food 1. Processed meats. This is the one that most people think they understand, and actually do not. Hot dogs, sausages, bacon, ham, deli cuts, canned meat, any meat that has been cured, smoked, preserved, or processed using nitrates and nitrites as a preservative. These foods already contain a meaningful concentration of N-nitroso, compounds simply from the way they are manufactured. The nitrites used as preservatives react with the amines naturally present in meat protein during the manufacturing process, producing nitrosamines before the food ever reaches your kitchen. When you reheat these foods, you are not starting with a clean chemical slate. You are applying heat to a food that already contains documented carcinogens, and heat accelerates nitrosamine formation. The higher the temperature and the longer the exposure, the more the reaction compounds. Frying or microwaving processed meat at high heat produces a meaningfully higher concentration of nitrosamines than the original food contained. Research examining the specific mechanism of dietary N-nitroso compounds and pancreatic cancer risk has found that high dietary intake of these compounds was associated with elevated pancreatic cancer risk. Studies examining red and processed meat consumption have proposed several mechanisms linking them to pancreatic cancer, with heterocyclic amines, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and N-nitroso compounds produced during high-temperature cooking, identified as key mutagens. The practical truth is this: processed meats contain their own built-in carcinogenic precursors. Cooking them once is already a chemical event. Reheating them is adding accelerant to a reaction that should never have been encouraged in the first place. If you are going to eat these foods, and I am not telling you to never eat them once. Fresh, prepared once, never reheated, and never microwave processed meat on high. Food 2. Spinach and other nitrate-rich leafy greens. This one surprises people the most, because they reach for spinach precisely because it is healthy. They add it to everything precisely because the nutrition advice they have received for decades has been correct. Spinach is genuinely rich in iron, folate, vitamins, and antioxidants. And then they reheat the leftover spinach from last night's dinner, and in doing so, undo a meaningful portion of that nutritional benefit while simultaneously triggering the very chemical pathway they were trying to avoid. Here is what happens. Spinach contains naturally occurring nitrates, compounds that in fresh spinach are entirely benign and even beneficial for blood pressure and cardiovascular function. When spinach is cooked and then allowed to cool and sit, even in the refrigerator, bacterial activity and enzymatic reactions within the cooked vegetable begin converting those nitrates into nitrites. This conversion happens continuously during storage. The longer the cooked spinach sits, the more nitrite it contains. When you reheat it, two things happen. The heat drives further nitrite formation, and the heat also drives a reaction between those nitrites and the amino acids present in the spinach, producing nitrosamines. A study published in the journal Foods specifically warned against storing boiled spinach for more than 12 hours at room temperature precisely because of this direct nitrate to nitrosamine conversion pathway. The same applies to other high-nitrate vegetables: celery, beetroot, kale, and carrots. Celery in particular contains extremely high concentrations of nitrates. When celery is cooked into soups and stews and then reheated repeatedly, as happens constantly in home cooking, each reheating cycle drives the nitrate to nitrite to nitrosamine conversion further along. The World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer confirmed that nitrosamines in food are established carcinogens linked specifically to gastrointestinal and pancreatic cancers. The irony is precise. The vegetable you are reheating specifically, because it is healthy, is chemically transforming into something that works against the very protection it was supposed to provide. The safest approach is straightforward. Cook spinach and leafy greens fresh in the quantity you will eat immediately. If you have leftover cooked spinach, eat it cold in a salad the next day rather than reheating it. Cold does not drive the nitrosamine-forming reaction. Heat does. Food 3. Cooking oils specifically. Reheating food that has already been cooked in oil once. Most people understand vaguely that oil reuse is not ideal. What most people do not understand is the specific chemistry of why, and how that chemistry connects directly to cancer risk. When a cooking oil, particularly a polyunsaturated oil like sunflower, corn, soybean, or canola, is heated to cooking temperature, a process called lipid peroxidation begins. The double bonds in polyunsaturated fatty acids react with oxygen and heat to produce a cascade of oxidized compounds. Aldehydes, particularly acrolein and 4-hydroxynonenal, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and acrylamide in the presence of starchy foods. These compounds are genotoxic. That means they cause direct damage to DNA. When that oil is reheated, or when food fried or cooked in that oil is reheated, the oxidation process continues from where it left off. Each additional exposure to heat compounds the damage. The smoke point, the temperature at which an oil begins to visibly break down, lowers with each use, meaning the oil reaches its toxic breakdown threshold faster and at lower temperatures with each reheating cycle. The concentration of aldehydes and PAs increases with each heating event. The International Agency for Research on Cancer has classified several of the primary compounds produced by repeated oil heating, including acrylamide and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, as probable human carcinogens. Every time you reheat fried foods, French fries, fried chicken, anything cooked in oil, you are applying additional heat to a food that was already sitting in oil that had undergone at least one prior oxidation cycle. And there is a specific additional risk with microwave reheating of fried foods in particular. When fried food is reheated in a microwave, the surface temperature becomes uneven. Some areas of the food reach extremely high temperatures, temperatures that scorch at a microscopic level, while others barely warm. The scorched areas produce the highest concentrations of all three classes of compounds, HCAs, PAs, and acrylamide, and you may not even notice the scorching because it occurs at a level that does not always produce visible browning. The safer approach: do not reheat fried foods. Eat fried foods once fresh immediately after cooking. If you must reheat, use an oven at a moderate, even temperature, and never reuse frying oil. Discard it after one use. Food 4. Rice. And this one is different from the others in a critical way. The risk from reheated rice is not primarily carcinogenic in the same direct chemical sense as the previous three foods. The risk is a bacterial toxin, one that is heat-resistant, meaning reheating does not destroy it, and that has documented connections to intestinal inflammation, which is itself a recognized and long-established risk factor for gastrointestinal cancers over long-term repeated exposure. Here is the mechanism. When cooked rice is left at room temperature, and research shows this happens routinely in households that cook rice in large batches, a bacterium called Bacillus cereus, whose spores survive the original boiling process and remain dormant in the cooked grain, begins to multiply. This bacterium produces two types of toxins. One causes vomiting within hours. The second causes diarrhea and is produced specifically during the storage phase, not after reheating. And this is the critical point that most people never hear. When you reheat the rice, you kill the bacteria, but the toxins they have already produced are heat-stable and heat-resistant. They survive full microwave reheating. They survive stovetop reheating. The bacteria are gone. The toxins remain in the food. In the short term, those toxins cause nausea, vomiting, abdominal cramping, and diarrhea. Unpleasant, but survivable for most people. In the long term, and this is the connection most people never hear, Repeated low-level exposure to bacterial toxins from improperly stored and reheated rice contributes to chronic intestinal inflammation. Chronic inflammation of the gastrointestinal tract is one of the most extensively documented pathways to gastrointestinal cancers in the medical literature. Every time the intestinal lining is irritated by heat-resistant bacterial toxins, the inflammatory response leaves microscopic damage. Over years and decades of weekly exposure, that accumulated damage creates the cellular environment in which cancer can develop. The connection between chronic intestinal inflammation and gastrointestinal cancers is one of the most replicated findings in cancer epidemiology. The protocol for rice is specific and simple. After cooking, cool rice quickly within 1 hour and refrigerate it immediately. The rapid cooling prevents the temperature from staying in the bacterial growth range long enough for significant toxin production. Store refrigerated for no more than 24 hours. When reheating, reheat once only. Ensure it reaches steaming hot throughout, not just warm in the center, and never reheat rice a second time. Cook rice in smaller quantities so there is less leftover. If you routinely cook large batches to save time, change that habit. The time saved is not worth the cumulative risk of weekly bacterial toxin exposure across years. Let me bring this together, because I want you to leave this video with a clear, specific picture, not anxiety, not a list of things to be afraid of, information that you can actually use starting tonight. 4 foods, 4 distinct mechanisms, 1 unifying principle. Reheated processed meats produce nitrosamines, N-nitroso compounds that research has specifically linked to pancreatic cancer development, and that the IARC classifies as probable human carcinogens. Reheated spinach and nitrate-rich leafy greens convert their naturally occurring nitrates into nitrites, and then into nitrosamines, through a heat-driven reaction that is completely preventable by simply eating them cold the following day or cooking them fresh. Reheated cooking oils and fried foods produce an accumulating load of aldehydes, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and acrylamide, genotoxic compounds that damage DNA directly, with each additional heating cycle compounding the previous one. Improperly stored and reheated rice delivers heat-stable bacterial toxins that survive the microwave and accumulate as chronic intestinal inflammation over years of repeated exposure, creating the conditions in which gastrointestinal cancers can develop. None of this requires you to change your entire diet. None of this requires you to stop enjoying food. It requires 4 specific habit changes. 1. Never reheat processed meats at high temperature. If you eat them once prepared fresh. 2. Eat cooked spinach and leafy greens cold the following day rather than reheating them. 3. Discard used cooking oil and never reheat fried foods. If you must, use a moderate oven, not a microwave. 4. Cool rice quickly. Refrigerate within 1 hour and reheat once only to steaming hot temperature throughout. Those 4 changes applied consistently to your weekly kitchen habits meaningfully reduce your exposure to the specific class of compounds that researchers and oncologists have connected to the cancers with the lowest survival rates in modern medicine. I want to say one more thing before I let you go, and I want to say it just one human being to another. I know that getting older is not always easy. I know that many of you watching this are doing everything you believe you are supposed to do, eating vegetables, managing your portions, taking your supplements, and something still feels off. Something still does not add up. The issue is not your effort. The issue is that no one gave you the full picture. You were not warned about this, and that is not your fault. But you know now, and that is what matters. I think about this constantly when I talk with people who tell me they are trying their best. They are trying their best. And the conversation we just had is the one they should have been able to have with their doctor. The one they should have encountered in a magazine or a public health campaign or a school. They should not have to find it on YouTube. But here we are, and I am glad you are here. Now tell me something in the comments. Which of these 4 foods surprised you the most? Was it the spinach? I am guessing for many of you it was the spinach, because you chose that specifically to protect your health. Leave your answer below with the word surprised and which food it was. That comment tells me exactly where the biggest gaps in public health education are, and that shapes every single video I make after this one. Your comment matters more than you know. If this video gave you something that is genuinely going to change how you cook this week, share it. Not for this channel. For the person in your life who reheats their leftover sausage every single morning and has never once thought about the chemistry they are consuming alongside it. That share may be the most useful thing you do for someone's health today. Subscribe for more honest conversations about what science actually says about the food choices that matter. Because next time, we are going to cover the 5 breakfast foods that are routinely marketed as healthy, and that the research increasingly suggests are doing the opposite, particularly for adults over 50. You do not want to miss it. One final and important thing. Everything I have shared today is based on published biochemistry, food science research, and the documented work of international cancer research organizations. This is educational information. It is not personal medical advice for your specific situation. The connection between dietary carcinogens and cancer risk is well established in the research literature. But cancer is complex and individual risk depends on many factors that I do not know about you. If you have concerns about cancer risk or your specific diet, please have that conversation with your own physician, the one who knows your history. Protect your health with the information your kitchen never came with. I will see you in the next one.